I know that I annoy economists all the time by doing outrageous things about using metaphors, but economists and politicians are not the same. Okay, politicians are realistically in real life rarely going to win a campaign when they say roll up everyone, this is going to be horrendous and you're not going to get anything and I'm going to take away all your sweeties. Now there's an exception actually. 2010, obviously the Tories, but they didn't win a majority, said deficit, Gordon Brown, sell the gold, disaster. Actually, there's hardly any money to spend. But in general, it's not a way to win an election or to try to hold on to power, to say to people it's going to be horrible gruel and a bit of gravel for your pudding if you're lucky. That's not to say that it's not important to explain the economic picture, and it's important to point out that the main parties have been shy of giving very much economic detail. But it's also, there's a bit, for me, and I can say this as a grumpy old hack, there is a bit of sort of, what's the word?
Well, it's unrealistic to
expect in a campaign. It doesn't mean it's okay before people scream. Doesn't mean okay. I'm not justifying it. I'm just saying that people getting their knickers in a twist this way is about something that's not unrealistic to expect them to do.
And I agree with you that it's unrealistic. I think we should also think, partly us as journalists, but much more us and the country as voters. Why is it unrealistic? If the country is not ready to have a serious conversation about the ways in which things might have to be tough, and if politicians, as I agree with you, correctly have assessed that it would not be in their interest to say so, perhaps that's because we voters, who get very high and mighty about politicians not levelling with us, are not ready for them to level.
We don't want to hear it. And actually, there's a really interesting piece by Matthew Syed in Sunday Times this morning saying exactly this point, that basically in the West, we want to think we can turn the taps on and there'll be milk and honey, and we don't want to hear about debt. And debt, like lots of the things we tried to raise this morning, actually climate change and Brexit, we tried to do a lot this morning with Labour and the Tories on subjects that haven't been much discussed in the campaign. The size of the national debt, one Tory former minister was saying to me the other day, kind of really wound up and cross, that people have not been talking about the sky-high level of the national debt, which I think is either about to hit 100% of GDP or just has, and I can't quite remember, but that's really interesting.
I mean, on Brexit, Nigel Farage appeared on Newsnight and said Brexit had been a failure. He's subsequently changed those words to say been a failure because the Conservatives didn't do it correctly. But he did say it'd been a failure. Now he's back. Rishi Sunak is a Brexiteer. And actually, Brexit itself has not been given the airtime that the D-Day non-appearance had, that the gambling had. I've not heard the parties held to the flame about Brexit. What progress did you make this morning?
Well, so on Brexit, we asked Labour and the Tories about Brexit this morning. And on Brexit, there is the overwhelming consensus from economists. And of course, there is a big range here. But the consensus from economists is that Brexit has made it harder for the UK to make ends meet in the long term, right? That is the economic consensus. The OBR has said it. All sorts of experts have said it. Rishi Sunak's old boss, Goldman Sachs, has said it about the long-term damage. And we put this to Rishi Sunak this morning. Even one of his political friends, one of his ministers, Kevin Hollingray, said on the radio the other day, yes, it has made trading more difficult. Rishi Sunak just did not want to touch that with a barge pole. And I mean a very long and spiky barge pole. It was like he just did almost everything he could to avoid addressing that point. We weren't trying to get him to say, oh, it was a terrible thing and the wrong thing, but would he acknowledge the economic consensus now that Brexit has longer term made it harder for the UK to trade around the world? He, of course, no surprise to newscasters, came back with evidence of new trade deals that he says that they've signed. He was citing recent statistics which suggest that the UK has been doing better recently than other EU countries.